Assalamu alaikum and hi everyone. My name is Norahim. It's been an extraordinary few weeks, and like many other people, we've been effectively in a movement control order period due to this pesky coronavirus. It is intimidating, a little bit scary, and quite frankly a challenge. These are trying times for sure, but it is not all doom and gloom. For garden and farm enthusiasts, this is a golden opportunity to get out into the garden and crack on with some much needed horticultural therapy. So here are some tips to help you and your garden shine during this difficult time. Imagine the joy of sowing seeds, then expectantly waiting for the first seedlings to push through. The satisfaction that comes from a beautiful bed of healthy vegetables after a weeding session. Or the elation of picking your own organic pesticide-free fruits. Gardeners and farmers are patient and kind people. So be proud of yourself. Let's go from there. You know, there are lots of gardening myths, misconception, or misinformation that's passed around a lot on the internet. Or maybe you've heard it from family and friends. Or maybe you've told some of this to family and your friends. But what I thought I would do today is to break down a couple of different myths and misconceptions when it comes to gardening. Hopefully, to shine a little bit of more explanatory light on what's actually happening in the garden, so you can take that knowledge and use it to grow some epic plants of yours. We will share some tips, basics on how to grow vegetables and other plants at home. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. You're looking forward to fresh veggies, and you can almost taste them as you're putting seed in the ground. You plant, you water, you wait, and then nothing happens. Or maybe you get the few plants that actually pop up, but it's nowhere near how many you planted. It can be one of the most frustrating experiences as a gardener. I mean, seeds are just supposed to work, right? If you've ever experienced this frustration, you're certainly not alone. It happens to all of us, and no matter how frustrating it can be, there is usually a good reason why seeds don't germinate. Identifying the cause will allow you to take the necessary steps to correct the issue and have a more successful planting experience. So what causes seeds to fail to germinate? And what can you do about it? So let's get there. When seeds do not sprout, you feel disheartened and you might be losing interest in gardening. So one of the reasons is that you might be using old or non-viable seeds. So always check the expiry date of the seeds you bought. There is a simple viable seeds test. You just pour seeds into a container of water. If they float, then they're non-viable. Just discard them and choose those sunk to the bottom. Those will grow. The second reason why your seeds are not sprouting could be coming from the bad seed starting potting mix or soil. Do not use garden soil because it is too compacted, so that seeds cannot sprout. It also contains lots of soil pathogen. So the recommendation, use a combination between cocoa peat or peat moss, 70% of them, and another 30% of compost. So this would be a best seed starting mix. Try it. The third reason why your seeds are not sprouting has to do with the role of sunlight. Seeds do not need sunlight to germinate. Dark, damp and warm conditions are best for sprouting seeds. But once they germinated and the two tiny new leaves are out, they will need sunlight. Sometimes you are just overexcited to plant something that you ended up sowing too deep. So what is wrong with planting seeds too deep? This will cause problem in sprouting. The ideal depth for sowing seeds are to plant them at the depth equal to 2 times or maximum 3 times their width. So it's better to plant too shallow than too deep. One of the most popular misconceptions about organic pesticides is that they do no harm, which is totally untrue. Just like chemical pesticides, organic pesticides will not discriminate between pests and beneficial insects eating the pests. So let's say it kills the aphids, whiteflies, and hungry caterpillars that destroy your plants. It also kills predatory insects such as ladybugs that would have naturally controlled them. So please use them as instructed on the label. The last misconception I want to highlight is the misuse of eggshells in the garden. So eggshells are really popular amendments. A lot of people like to use them in the garden. And what I thought I would do first, before we get into how people use or misuse them, let's talk about what actually is an eggshell that makes it so valuable for us. So first of all, it is calcium, right? About 50 parts per million of calcium within an eggshell. But let's talk about one of the most common ways I see them used that actually has nothing to do with the nutrient content of them at all. And that would be as a slug or snail barrier. A lot of people will crush them up and use them by placing them around a sensitive plant, with the logic that the sharp edges of the crushed eggshell will deter slugs and snails. It is just simply not true. You can actually go watch videos of time lapses where slugs crawl right over and right back over again. And actually, there are videos of slugs and snails crawling over the blades of extremely sharp knives. But the sharpness is not a good reason for a slug or a snail. What actually deters slugs and snails is either straight up impeding their motion, so they are not able to get to the plant at all, or doing something that affects their actual tissues, right? We may be able to slow down their movement, true, if they are laid thickly enough to prevent them from crawling beneath it. You will need a lot of eggshell just to protect just a couple of plants. Easier and better slug control exists. Why don't you set a yeast trap by sinking small pots filled with yeast solution into the ground? Because slugs and snails love yeasty liquid, and they will drown trying to drink it. Or you can also protect crops in pots by applying a grip-resistant barrier of petroleum jelly. Try them. Let's talk about prepping your soil. Step 1. The soil is a storehouse for all the elements plants need to grow: nutrients, organic matter, air, and water. Soil also provides support for plant roots. When properly prepared and cared for, soil can be improved each year and will continue to grow plants forever. If you don't care about your soil, you're probably just growing weeds. Step 2. In gardening, weeds are unwanted and uncultivated plants that grow with crops and compete with crops for nutrients, and can also cause crop toxification. Weeding is the removal of weeds and is mostly done before flowering begins in crop plants. However you choose to do it, It is just necessary. Step 3. Almost all garden soils can be improved by adding organic matter to make soil more workable. Organic matter 1. Loosens tight clay. It helps sand hold more water. Organic matter helps to make soil easier to dig, and they also add nutrients. Now that you have done prepping your soil, you're one step ahead in producing your own veggies. Way to go! The pH of your garden soil is an important factor that can often be overlooked. The pH in your garden soil can impact the availability of nutrients within that soil and your plant's ability to take them up. If you are growing in a soil that is not optimal for the plants, often you can sacrifice all of your harvest, or if your plant does produce, it is going to look very stressed and produce significantly less. pH is measured on a 14-point scale, with 0 being the most acidic, 7 neutral, and 14 the most basic. Most common garden plants prefer a slightly acidic or neutral soil. There are 2 common ways that you can measure the pH of your garden soil. Most accurate way to learn the pH of your soil is to run a sample through a laboratory. You can also measure them yourself. However, this method is less accurate, but that should give you a good indication if you are roughly in the right range or not. For example, if you're going to grow basil, lady's finger, and roses, you might want to make sure that your soil pH shall be within the best range, which is between 6 and 6.75. You can always buy a portable pH meter for under Malaysian ringgit 50, and that should be accurate enough for your purposes. The second is distilled water. You can pick at home, and it has a neutral pH, whereas your rainwater may be a little acidic and your tap water is a little basic, which can throw off your results. When using a portable pH meter, the more sampling locations you measure, the more accurate your numbers will be. If your pH is very low and you need to raise it, lime can be added to bring that pH back up. If the pH is too high and you need to lower it, then you can add elemental sulfur into your garden soil. You may not know it, but many of the insects you find in your garden and farm are actually beneficial. We have those who are providing pollination services, like the bumblebees. Almost 90% of flowering plants rely on insect pollinators, and at least 10% of the world agricultural output is dependent on pollination. So pollinators are really important. Insectivorous plants are plants that flower, that attract good bugs to the garden, that eat the bad bugs, or wards off the bad bugs in the garden. Poppies, daisies, mints, and mustards are just a few species to name them. When you grow flowers that attract good bugs to the garden, they police the garden for you, and some of them can attract bugs away from your garden. Parsley, for example, when it bolts to seed, it sends up an umbrella-shaped flower that attracts parasitic wasps. And parasitic wasps poke holes in the aphids and lays their young inside them. So you get free pest control from these tiny little insects. As an organic grower, we can use a natural pesticide made from readily available sources such as neem leaves, garlic, and also peppers. These are common materials known for their active ingredients that wonderfully react with pests, used in the making of an organic insect repellent. So here is an example of how you can make one of your own. Weigh a mixture of neem leaves, chilies, and garlic, let's say 500 grams. Add another 500 milliliters of water. Get them into a mixer, seed them, and that's your organic insect repellent. You can then dilute them accordingly, spray them on your problematic plants twice or 3 times a week. Composting food scraps can reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions and prevent unnecessary amounts of waste from going to landfills. Although composting is not the only measure to save food scraps from ending up in landfills, reusing your food scraps to make kitchen compost is an elegant, simple solution that has several positive benefits. It helps in the reduction of greenhouse gases, supports the greening of your community, and your plants will go nuts for its rich nutrients. After a certain amount of time left for decomposition process, your food scraps will turn into black gold. Here is how a mature compost would look like. Now it's ready for action. It may take longer, but it is worth waiting for. Compost. A fermented fruit extract or fermented juice from fruit peels, especially those during fruit season, you can find them abundantly. It's something that you don't want to miss making, as the fermented product provides plants with nutrients and growth hormones for your garden plants. What you need is just the same amount of fruit peels, brown sugar that you can steal from your wife's kitchen, in an empty container. You leave them for a month, and then the fertilizer is ready for you to use. One of the most important things we normally grow basil from seeds. Just sprinkle your seeds onto your potting mix. Cover your seeds with about 2 or 3 millimeters of compost. Then press it down gently. Keep it in a warm place and water regularly. You should know that basil loves sunlight at least 6 hours a day, so you should know where to plant it. I just love peppermints. You can easily grow them from stem cuttings. Once it has propagated, you would want to trim them on a regular basis, as they are pretty invasive. Another reason to trim it is that once it started to get bushy, the leaves will tend to get smaller, so it would be best to trim it back to get big main leaves. Brazilian spinach is one of the most productive edible leafy green vegetables you can grow behind your garden. If you water and fertilize them often enough, they will put on lots of soft, new, tender growth for you. As it is perennial, you only have to grow them once, and they will grow and produce all year round. You can just break up a piece, remove the lower leaves, and plant it straight into the ground. It will strike as long as you water it. When harvesting branches to take cuttings from, you want to select branches that have healthy, new growth and avoid any pest damage, yellowing, or that have flowers on them. I am pretty confident that many of us have lots of woes that they only have shady spaces at home. Whether you have a big building blocking you, a big tree, a big house, whatever the case may be, and you say, "Oh, I can't grow anything worthwhile," think again because you still stand a chance to do so. Now, you might say, "I've got only 2 to 4 hours of sun. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to grow." Well, it would be a big mistake to ignore those sections of your available area. You can still squeeze out, like I said, an impressive amount of yield. So we're going over a few different vegetables and herbs that do well. Some of them can do well, some of them can tolerate shade. For example, you might have a space in front of your backyard with a little blockage by an awning that it only receives less amount of sunlight during peak hours of the day. So what can you do? Let's go from there. So crop number 1, the spinach plant. It is an incredible cold-tolerant green. It is a great shady garden crop that you want to grow. Things to know about spinach: cold-tolerant means heat intolerance. You don't want to grow them in spaces where you've got lots of direct sun and by excessive amount of heat. I would recommend that you grow from seeds. However, since that you are sowing them in a shady spot, it might take longer time for them to germinate. Shady crop number 2 is going to be the most varieties of leaf lettuce. Lettuce is a quick growing crop. Of course, it will grow a little bit slower in the shade. And of course, starting from a transplant is going to help you, because if you are starting the seed by direct sowing in your shady bed, then that early growth is really going to get stunted. So if you go ahead with the transplant, you're going to get it off a much better start. As we move into shady crop number 3, we talk about crops that are not necessarily shade lovers, but more to shade intolerance. You can still get a decent yield. Now that would be potatoes. Surprisingly, they still can do well in your shady bed. Turmeric are technically shady crop number 4. Another one crop that would be a very fast maturing cold-tolerant bush tomato. And so surprisingly, you can still squeeze out a yield of tomatoes in a shady garden bed or even in pots like this. Part of ginger family. Finally, shady crop number 5 is bush bean. One of the easiest examples of a bush bean is the dwarf long bean. Bush beans will produce in a shady garden. You can also use vertical tower type of system to grow them, but make sure to rotate your tower so that both sides get equal amount of shades. Seed the rhizome. All the plants shown in this sharing session were grown in shady places located at College Tun Hussein on UTM, using food waste compost made here. We're done with the insight to become an urban farmer throughout these slides. I hope that all the information shared will somehow give out hope for all of us who are interested in getting themselves involved in this sustainable, self-sufficient activity. Thank you for watching. Good luck. Roughly 2 or 3 inches square. They planted in a free draining crumbly soil so that it is easier for them to expand. You can also mulch them with old leaves to prevent weeds from competing with its growth. You can start harvesting after 6 months' time. So how do we harvest them? We let the plants die back fully because this is the time when it transfers all the energy into the rhizome, and that prepares it for the dormant stage to come. And when you harvest the roots, it'll be better tasting because it is more mature, and it'll also store better on the shelf. Carefully dig up the rhizome with a garden fork, or it'll come out in clumps. With a little bit of pulling and shaking, come apart quite easily. Turmeric and pepper plants will survive as long as you water them on a regular basis, just like this. You know about when you're growing ginger is that we call it a ginger root, but we are actually harvesting the rhizome. So when you're growing ginger, you should be looking for the eyes. Another tip you should know when growing ginger is that the bigger rhizome chunky plants, the faster you're going to get ginger because you're going to get sprouts.